Good morning, evening, afternoon, whenever you're at. Today we're looking at solving equations algebraically, but specifically absolute value and fraction equations. So our first video is going to be on absolute value. And we're going to extend our idea of undoing that we learned last week. Rewriting we didn't really go over, but so our undoing strategy we're really focusing on to absolute value equations, and then the next video will be equations involving fractions. So today we'll talk about absolute value. Just remember that the output for an absolute value must always be positive. So the right side is always positive when you have just the absolute value. So step one is to isolate the absolute value bars. And the way you're going to do that is with the undoing strategy that we learned last time. And again, that is PEMDAS backwards. So you undo addition, subtraction first, undo multiplication, division next, and then undo exponents, and then last undo parentheses. Once you do that, you're going, since the absolute value is the distance from 0, you're going to have two equations. One thinking like the right side being positive, one the right side being negative, the distance from 0. Either that number to the right or to the left. So the first equation is going to be drop the absolute value bars and keep the right side positive. Okay, so nothing really changes other than dropping the absolute value bars. Equation 2, you're going to drop the absolute value bars, and then when you drop the absolute value bars, you're going to make the right side negative as well. And then finally, you'll have two equations, and you're going to solve those two equations by undoing. So we'll have a couple of examples here. And here's our first one. Absolute value of 2x plus 8 minus 2. So again, step one is to isolate the absolute value by undoing. So isolate means to get by itself. So right now the absolute value is not by itself on the left-hand side. We have this minus 2. So I'm going to get rid of that, whatever's around the absolute value, by undoing. So I undo addition, subtraction first. Well, here's subtraction, so I'm adding 2 first. So I have the absolute value of 2x plus 8 equals 20. Notice now that the absolute value is by itself, it is equal to an output that is positive, so I do have an answer here. And now I'm going to follow this step 2. I'm going to make two equations. First one says drop the absolute value, so I just have 2x plus 8, keep the right side positive, so I get 2x plus 8 equals 20. The second equation says to drop the absolute value, so 2x plus 8, and it says make the right side negative. So notice the only thing I'm doing on the left side is getting rid of the absolute value, and the difference on the right side, one's positive, one's negative. Then solve the two equations by undoing. So I'm going to subtract 8 and then divide by 2. So one answer would be x equals 6. And if I go back in here, 2 times 6 is 12, plus 8 is 20, and the absolute value of 20 is 20, so that works. Here I'm going to subtract 8 and then divide by 2. So I get x equals negative 14 as my other answer. And if I double check that in here, 2 times negative 14 is negative 28, plus 8 is negative 20, and the absolute value of negative 20 is positive 20. So that's why we need those two answers. They both work. Oh, sorry. Don't think you guys saw that. So there is that problem. All right, example 2. So again, I want to isolate the absolute value by undoing. So again, undoing is PEMDAS backwards. So I'm undoing addition, subtraction first. So this minus 4, I have to get rid of. So I'm adding 4 to both sides first. So I have 3 times the absolute value of 2x plus 7 equals 33. One thing you cannot do is you cannot distribute through an absolute value. So therefore, again, it says I'm undoing to isolate that absolute value. So now I'm undoing multiplication, division. So this is times or multiply by 3. So that means I have to divide both sides by 3. So I'd have the absolute value of 2x plus 7 equals 11. I make two equations from there. Again, first equation, drop the absolute value and keep the right side positive, and then drop the absolute value and make the right side negative. So now I'm just solving. So I subtract 7 and divide by 2. So I get one answer of x equals 2. And my other answer will be 2x equals negative 18 divided by 2. X equals negative 9. So you are always going to get two answers for these absolute values. All right, and example 3. Again, I have to isolate that absolute value first, and right now it's not isolated. So I'm going to subtract 10 because I'm doing PEMDAS backwards. And when I do that, I get the absolute value of 3x plus 5 is equal to negative 6. Just remember, what did we say always about the output of an absolute value? When that absolute value is isolated, it always must have a positive, be equal to a positive number. And right now, this absolute value is equal to a negative number. So therefore, this tells me that there is no solution. And again, the reason there's no solution is because the output must be positive. All right, I'd like you to try doing these two on your own. Pause the video, try and do them, and then I will, you can check your work. All right, welcome back. Hopefully you had time to work. For number 1, there's isolating that absolute value first. There's no addition subtraction for me to undo, but there is a 4 that's being multiplied. So I'm going to undo that first by dividing by 4. That gives me the absolute value of 2x minus 1 equals 5. And now I undo that absolute value by making two equations. So drop the absolute value and keep the right side positive, drop the absolute value and make the right side negative. Notice I'm not changing the sign at all on the left-hand side. I'm just dropping the absolute value. I'm adding 1, so we get 2x equals 6, or x equals 3 as one answer. I add 1, 2x equals negative 4, and when I divide by 2, x equals negative 2. All right, and our other example for you to do on your own, again, we're isolating the absolute value with undoing. So I undo addition and subtraction first, so I'm adding 1 to both sides. And then I undo multiplication division, so I'm getting rid of this multiplication by 3 by dividing by 3. And I have the absolute value of x plus 2 is equal to 3. And the way I undo that absolute value is to make two equations. X plus 2 equals positive 3, and x plus 2 equals negative 3. And then I just solved two equations. So here I'm subtracting 2, so x equals 1 is one answer, and then x equals negative 5 is my other answer. All right. Hopefully this helps with absolute value. If you need help, please contact me during office hours.